a lot of deliberations took place with the institute in the formation stage of PFRDA. And even after the formation, we have been in regular touch with the institute. And we have been conducting programs from time to time. The most recent one being a webinar that we had in sometimes 6 or 7 months ago. And I believe a new initiative, to propagate about and spread awareness about pensions is in the offing. So we are tying up a few things, and hopefully once that is in place, our interaction with the institute will be a lot more than what we've seen in the past. We are quite sure that this association will be very fruitful going forward. Now, talking about pensions, the term pension is actually a fairly new term in India. In fact, it's a fairly new financial product as far as India is concerned. Now, if you were to step back in time, say about a couple of decades back, say 20, 30 years ago, the term pension would have been fairly unfamiliar to most people. Because who got pension? Just a select few of the population, just a select few in the community got pensions. There were the government servants, of course, who got pensions. Then there were the defense people who got pensions. And later on, in organized industry, from 95 onwards, they started getting pension. So there were just a handful of people in the whole country who really got pensions. And that's why it was not a term very familiar to most people. In fact, I remember in my childhood, the only time one heard of pension was when one was talking about some government servant or some government official or some defense person. It's only then that one heard about pension. Otherwise, in the normal scheme of things, pension was fairly unknown. And there were some other reasons as well, apart from the fact that this was an exclusive club of pensioners, for whom this benefit was available. Apart from that, there was this great institution that we had. Of course, we still have it, but it's slowly eroding. And this great institution that we had was this joint family system. So how did people take care of themselves in their old age, say 30, 40 years in the past? They had this great institution to fall back upon, the joint family system, where the parents lived with their children and their grandchildren as one cohesive unit. I mean, the pool of finances were brought together, and everybody lived off the earnings from the pool that came into the pool. And this worked very well, so long as the joint family remained as one cohesive unit. But then things started to change, especially after industrialization, after the second 5-year plan, which started from 56 onwards, when the country started rapidly industrializing. Urbanization followed that. So there was a move away from villages and towns to cities and other places, with the result that the cohesiveness of this joint family started breaking up. And with that happening, the younger people started moving away from villages and towns and to cities in search of better opportunities, new jobs and better opportunities. Leaving old people behind. Now, this became a problem because, in the past too, people didn't have much of savings. And because of the joint family, they could fall back upon the children to sustain them in their old age. But once the children started moving away, then the old people are left to fend for themselves, and this became a big problem for old people, because with their meager savings and meager incomes, it was very difficult to pull through. And so this problem started assuming very large proportions in the 70s, 80s and 90s. And the government in the 1990s, woke up to this fact that this was a problem that had to be faced head on. And one couldn't afford to ignore this problem, this looming problem, because otherwise it could have spent, it had a lot of ramifications, social ramifications, law and order issues, and apart from the fact that a lot of people would remain poor. So the government woke up to this fact in the 1990s, and they set up this committee. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with this Oasis Committee, which was set up. and under the chairmanship of Dr. Dave. And this committee came up with a series of recommendations, one of which was to promote a pension scheme, a voluntary pension scheme for those who are not covered by any of those regular schemes run by the government and the defense and organized industry. So this was one of the recommendations, key recommendations, and this the national pension system is an outcome of the recommendation, and the creation of PFRDA as a regulatory body for this kind of a pension scheme is also an outcome of the committee's report. Now I mentioned that the things that started changing in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all, and old people were left to fend for themselves in their old age. Now this problem, one has to understand the dimensions of this problem to really appreciate the gravity of the issue here. I don't know how many of you are aware that even as we speak, there are more than 100 million people over the age of 60 in this country. I don't know how many of you are aware about this. 100 million people over the age of 60 in this country, which is 3 times the population of Canada and probably 4 times the population of Australia. So this is the number that we have. And the prognosis is that by 2030, this number will increase from 100 million to 180 million. And by 2050, the 60 plus cohort age group will be about 25% of India's population. It will be touching about 300 million this thing. So this is the kind of, this is the size of issue that we are talking about. And the problem, is grave. Also because of the fact that there is very little available in India by way of social security. And unlike most countries in the world where you have a social security cover, if a person stops working, he can fall back upon his social security contributions to sustain him in his old age. And most countries have this kind of cover. In India, we have a partial cover, in the sense that the government does support old people, but it only supports those people who are below the poverty line. So we have these government schemes which are run, the Indira Gandhi Old Age Pension Scheme, which provides pension of a meager amount of 200 rupees per month to those people who are below the poverty line in India. And that amount goes up from 200 to 500 once the person crosses the age of 80. Now some states supplement the central government pension with their own pension schemes. Goa has the most liberal one. I'm told they give about 1,800 rupees per month. But then you have at the other end of the spectrum, Assam with just 50 rupees pension per month. So a whole spectrum of cover pension payment that states provide. But there are some states which don't have any schemes of their own. So old people do not have protection. It's only these BPL families which get any sort of support from the government. And the large mass of the elderly do not get any kind of income support from the government. So this is the issue here. You have a huge number of people there. Already, as I said, more than 100 million people over the age of 60, numbers growing by the day. In fact, this 60 plus is the fastest growing age group in the country today. Fastest growing. And the numbers are likely to assume very large proportions. And unless something is done to tackle this issue, unless something is done to provide some kind of income support to people in their old age, things are only going to go from bad to worse. So that's why the government is very, very much concerned about this issue. And like I mentioned, the reason why a voluntary pension scheme was thought of by the Oasis Committee was to tackle this issue. But I'll admit this is not the optimal solution for tackling India's social security problem. But at the end of the day, a voluntary scheme is a voluntary scheme. People will join if they feel like joining. If people are convinced that this is a good thing for them, they'll join. What we really require is some kind of a mandation here. You need people to join a pension scheme on a compulsory basis, because these kind of decisions are usually put off by people till the very end. I know that they feel they can do without a pension, and A lot of issues there, which lead to procrastination about deciding on joining a pension scheme or the other. What we optimally need is a mandatory scheme. But be that as it may, we have this voluntary pension scheme which we are trying to promote, and it's not an easy task to push a pension scheme among the lay people. It's not an easy task, and there are various reasons for that. One is that pensions somehow has this emotional quotient. People don't like to think of old age. Generally, people don't like. People think that it's something that we'll think about when we grow old. So nobody likes to think about old age, and a decision to provide for old age therefore also suffers as a consequence of this thought process. Then the second thing is this. Actually, we talk about the demographic dividend that we have. A young population, and it's a very good thing to have. But young people, particularly, are they don't like to think about pension. It's too remote a thing for them to really be concerned about. And therefore, to convince young people about saving, setting aside monies for pension is a particularly challenging task, because they have their own priorities, and the pension is probably one of the last things that they would like to think about. So these are some of the challenges that we face in pushing pension among the people in the country. But we are slowly doing that. We have tried to create awareness and build, get people to believe that providing for pension, providing for their old age is a good thing to do, and that's how we try to build up this kind of a consensus among people. Now, I mentioned about the fact that old people are generally left to fend for themselves in their old age now, and again, some of the statistics here are quite staggering. I was reading the other day that almost 40% of people over the age of 60 continue to work because there is no other alternative. They don't have any other means of income, and they have to continue working. And the most shocking thing was 20% of the people over the age of 80 have to continue to work because there is no other alternative. They have no savings left. They have no savings to support themselves. So unless they continue to work, they cannot sustain themselves. And these are some of the shocking things, And this was the United Nations Population Fund report of 2011. 43% of the elderly, that is 60 plus, do not have any income. This was their finding. 43% of the people in the 60 plus group do not have any income of their own, as a result of which they either fall back on their family if they are willing to support them, or relatives, or the community at large. So this is the plight. This is the real seriousness of the problem. We have far too many people who are not provided for, and the problem gets aggravated by the fact that people are living longer thanks to better healthcare facilities, thanks to the better medical attention, all that. So people are living longer, and when you live longer, you need more funds to support yourself in your old age, and inflation, things like inflation, whatever meager saving you might have get eroded because of inflation. So this is another issue which people have to think about when they plan for their old age retirement. Now, so we set up this scheme. This national pension scheme was set up in 2004. We started off with the government service because the government wanted to move over from the defined benefit to the defined contribution scheme, so as to ease the financial burden on the government. But like I said, one of the more important recommendations was to have a voluntary pension scheme for the people at large here, for the non-government sector. And I also mentioned that the challenge is to really convince these people to join a pension scheme and set aside monies on a regular basis for their old age. And this is where chartered accountants, professionals like you, all of you, can play a role in trying to convince people that saving for pension is a good thing to do, and they do need to start this as early as possible. And the task is particularly challenging in a voluntary contributory scheme like the one that we have. See, unlike the government pension scheme, where the pension that a person will get is decided. The old pension scheme, it was decided 50% of your last pay will be your salary, will be your pension, and no contribution, so no worries about that. About having enough funds, no contributions at all. It all comes from the government budget. But in the voluntary contributory scheme, is the people who themselves contribute. Their monies are invested by us. And then, the monies invested earn a return from which, the pension gets paid. So there are a lot of decisions which the individual has to take. A lot of decisions which the individual has to take. And given the state of financial literacy in the country, there are not many who can take these kind of decisions. So that's where they need support from professionals. And that's where people like all of chartered accountants, and we now have some, a pool of people called retirement advisors. We just started that. So that's where all of you can play an important role. The first thing that you need to tell people is to start an account. We've all heard of the power of compounding, all of your chartered accountants, so I don't have to explain this to you. But the power of a compounding really works magically when you start young. If you start young, then the power of compounding has full play. And by the time you're, say, 60 or 65, it really brings a lot of benefits to a person. Whereas if you were to start later, then compounding would lose much of its magic, and charm. So starting early is the first thing that you need to tell people to do. And then we give choices to people in the non-government sector. We give choices. They can choose their investment pattern. They could have more of equity, less of debt, less of government securities. So those kind of decisions also require some help and support, because not many people are aware of the intricacies of investing. We also give a choice of choosing a fund manager. We appoint fund managers to manage the contributions that people give under this national pension system. So a lot of people need support there also. Which fund manager should I choose? Who will give me the best kind of return? So these kind of decisions are best understood with the help of financial advice and support from professionals like you. So this is another area where chartered accountants can play a big role. Then in the case of corporates, we encourage a lot of companies to join the national pension system, and through them their employees. We have now more than 4,000 companies who have become members of the national pension system. And the NPS has a lot of benefits for corporate employees. One is that the corporates can partly or fully fund the pension contributions if they wish to, and the salaries and all could be structured in such a way as to ease the burden on the employee. And we have been conducting these kind of seminars for corporates with the help of FICCI, and now I'm told something with the institute is also in the offing. So we try to explain to corporates about the benefits of joining NPS and how it would work to their advantage and to their employees' advantage. And apart from that, we have these tax benefits. A reference was made to some time ago about the tax benefits that NPS confers on subscribers. And the unique thing in NPS is that this additional 50,000 that we have, if you invest in NPS, is not available with the other capital market instruments. So this is unique to NPS. And so for those who are in the higher tax brackets, this definitely is a big attraction, and we push it there. Then the other class of people whom we target are the self-employed people. Now, self-employed people particularly require some help and attention from professionals, because unlike employed people, they don't have any paternalistic employer guiding them about where to invest, what to invest, how much to invest, and all that. So they are generally left on their own, and they don't have benefits like gratuity, which a person in employment would have. They don't have those LTC benefits, which bring some tax benefits. They don't have those kind of supports available. through the formal mechanism. So for them, some hand-holding, some guidance is required to see that they provide, set aside amounts for meeting the requirements of the old age. So self-employed particularly need a lot of help and assistance. And we had taken it up with the government to allow larger deductions to self-employed people towards NPS. And last year the government agreed to raise the contribution levels from 10% of their income to 20%. So they can put in 20% of their income in NPS and get a tax benefit, subject of course to the ceiling. So these are some of the things that professionals can do to help people understand about pensions and help them to join the pension schemes. And there's a lot that can be done. And like I said, the problem is very grave, and particularly at the lower income levels, the awareness levels are very low, and the savings capacity of people is also very limited at lower levels. And it is for them that schemes like this Atal Pension Yojana that we are currently running it, it's attracted a good response. We got about 73 lakh subscribers in just about 2.5 years. So that's meeting with a good response from people. And but the problem is all pervasive. In India, it's only the formal sector which is still covered by proper pension schemes. The informal sector, which accounts for almost 85% of the workforce, is still very scantily covered by pension scheme. And our goal, therefore, is to see that we extend pension cover to as many people as possible in this country, so that the government's dream of making India a pension society. The finance minister had very famously made this statement 2 years ago, that they would like to see India becoming a pension society. So if that is to become a reality, we all need to put in our efforts. Thank you very much.